For 20 years, the fires of revolution and empire had consumed Europe. At the center of the storm stood one man, Napoleon Bonaparte. By 1814, it seemed over. He was defeated, exiled, his empire dismantled, but in an astonishing twist, he escaped. In the spring of 1815, Napoleon returned to Paris, reclaiming his throne without firing a shot. The era known as the 100 Days had begun. Europe's crowned heads, meeting in Vienna, were terrified. They declared him an outlaw. Now, it was all or nothing. Napoleon had one final, desperate gamble: strike fast before his enemies could unite. Three legendary commanders now faced each other. First, Napoleon, the military genius but older, less vigorous. He needed a quick, decisive victory to shatter Allied morale. His opponents were a study in contrasts. The Duke of Wellington, commanding an Anglo-Allied army. He was a master of defense, renowned for his cool head and his ability to use terrain to break enemy attacks. And Field Marshal Blücher, the 72-year-old commander of the Prussian army, gritty, relentless, and burning with a desire for revenge after previous defeats. Napoleon's plan was classic: strike at the seam between the two Allied armies near Brussels, defeat them separately, and then deal with the rest of Europe. On June 15, 1815, he crossed the border into Belgium. The campaign's first moves happened on June 16th. Napoleon personally hammered Blücher's Prussians at the Battle of Ligny, inflicting heavy casualties and forcing a retreat. Crucially, however, he believed he had driven them east, away from Wellington. He was wrong. Blücher retreated north, keeping the link alive. Meanwhile, at Quatre Bras, Wellington fought a bloody holding action against Napoleon's subordinate, Marshal Ney. With the Prussians beaten, Wellington now made a brilliant fighting withdrawal. He fell back to a ridge south of the village of Waterloo, a position he had carefully scouted before. Here he would make his stand. He sent a message to Blücher: "I will stand at Waterloo if you can promise me the support of even one Prussian corps." Blücher's reply was simple: "I will come." Take a look at the battlefield. Wellington's army was positioned along a long forward slope of a ridge. This meant attacking French troops would be silhouetted against the skyline. He fortified two key forward positions: the chateau of Hougoumont on his right and the farmhouse of La Haye-Sainte in the center. These would act as breakwaters against the French tide. Opposite them, Napoleon assembled his Armée du Nord. A heavy thunderstorm had drenched the ground overnight, turning fields to mud. This proved decisive. Napoleon, relying on his grand battery of cannons and massed cavalry, chose to wait for the ground to dry. He delayed the main attack until late morning. It was a fatal pause, giving Blücher's Prussians more time to march. Around 11:30 a.m., the battle opened with a diversionary attack on Hougoumont. But Wellington poured resources into it, and it became a vicious all-day battle that sucked in French troops. Then, Napoleon launched his first major assault, a massive infantry column against Wellington's left center. As the dense French formations crested the ridge, they were met not by a thin line, but by devastating volleys from Wellington's infantry, deployed in their signature two-rank line. The column was shattered. The British infantry's discipline and rate of fire proved deadly. Frustrated, Napoleon and Ney now unleashed the might of the French cavalry. Thousands of cuirassiers and lancers thundered up the slope in what seemed like an unstoppable wave. But Wellington had a legendary defense, the infantry square. His men formed into hollow squares, presenting a wall of bayonets on every side. Cavalry would not charge home into such a formation. For hours, the French cavalry swirled around these unbreakable squares, taking horrific casualties from point-blank musket fire. It was magnificent, but it was not war. It was slaughter. The Allied line held, but it was being pounded to pieces by French artillery. As Wellington's situation grew desperate, salvation appeared on the horizon. From mid-afternoon, the vanguard of Blücher's Prussian army began to arrive, hammering Napoleon's right flank at the village of Plancenoit. Napoleon was forced to divert his precious reserves to meet this new threat. At the same time, the key bastion of La Haye-Sainte finally fell to a relentless French assault. Napoleon now saw his chance. He ordered a massive bombardment of Wellington's center. The Allied line was battered, thin, and on the brink of collapse. This was the moment for the coup de grace. As evening fell, Napoleon committed his final elite reserve, the Imperial Guard. These were the veterans of 100 battles, undefeated, the symbol of the empire. In eerie silence, their columns advanced towards the battered Allied center for the decisive blow. They crested the ridge. What happened next is the stuff of legend. Wellington had hidden infantry lying down behind the crest. As the guard loomed out of the smoke, he gave the order, "Now, Maitland, now's your time." The British Guards stood up and delivered a devastating point-blank volley. A second volley followed, then a bayonet charge. For the first time in history, the Imperial Guard stopped, staggered, and began to retreat. A cry of panic, "La Garde recule!" rippled through the French army. The effect was instantaneous and total. Seeing his invincible guard break, Wellington stood in his stirrups and waved his hat forward. The entire Allied line surged down the slope. The French army dissolved into a panicked rout. The battle was over. Napoleon fled the field. That night, Wellington and Blücher met at the inn called La Belle Alliance. The victory was complete. 4 days later, Napoleon abdicated for the second and final time. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he died 6 years later. The Napoleonic Wars were over. The Congress of Vienna redrew the map of Europe, aiming for a balance of power that would prevent another continent-wide war for a century. Waterloo cemented Wellington's legend, ended an era, and began a new chapter in European history. It was, as the Duke himself admitted, the nearest run thing you ever saw in your life. A day of immense stakes, decided by the thin red line on a ridge in Belgium. What's your take on the Battle of Waterloo? Was it Napoleon's mistakes, Wellington's genius, or Blücher's determination that decided the day? Let's discuss in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video, where we'll be covering T's next topic, e.g. the samurai uprising at Shimabara. Thanks for watching.